So good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Denise.
I'd like to welcome our visitors, and especially Esther. After we don't know how many years, she's here with us. We'd like to thank and want to thank God for the healing that is coming through for John Simons. And our message for this morning is going to be on the parable of the wheat and the tares. And we are going to look at Matthew chapter 13, and we'll start from verse 10 to verse 19. Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 to verse 19.
And the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given."
So here what Jesus is doing, keep this in mind. They've asked Jesus, what is the purpose for the parable? Why do you speak to them in parables? Well, Jesus first speaks very openly, shares truth openly, and when hearts and minds aren't receptive, then he starts going even to the best possible way that he can communicate truth to them. And now he's talking to them in parables. So when in verse 11, when he said, he answered and said to them, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. Pay particular attention to that statement Jesus is making. To you, it has been given to know what? The mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, which means to say everything that has to do with God's domain, everything that has to be in reference to how God operates in his system. And that's what we are going to see. So it's very clear that what Jesus is stating, that it's no longer a mystery for them. Why? Because he is telling them that he is teaching them. So, I'll repeat it again. Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven. But to them it has not been given. Now, if we misinterpret what is being stated there, but to them it has not been given, of course it was given to them. It was very clear. It was given to them, but what was happening? They were rejecting it. They were hardening their hearts. So that's what he means, that it was not given to them. It was given to them, but the condition of their heart weren't receptive to what Jesus was giving.
For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him.
Pay particular attention now to verse 2. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. What does that mean? That means to say that the more we receive the revelation that Jesus Christ gives, the more that all of Jesus' teachings and the totality of his ministry, when the Holy Spirit starts taking all of that and revealing it to us, the more we accept it and absorb it and live it out, in great abundance, this will be given to us. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. So what that means is that whoever does not have, so let's say for Christians, whatever understanding we have, if we reject Jesus' revelation and Jesus' teachings, then you know what ends up happening? Even the understanding that we had will be taken away. How? Because we are not going into all truth. And Jesus is the truth. He is all truth. So when we reject that, then what ends up happening? Even what we have, the little bit of understanding that we might have had, when the message that Jesus gives is given to us, our heart become hard and we start rejecting that message. Why? Because it doesn't fit with our carnal human thinking. So if it doesn't fit with our carnal human thinking, the agape love message that is being given will cause us to have a very negative view of that message, a very negative way of looking at it, which means to say that even before we're exposed to the agape love message, by rejecting it, we will become, in a sense, anti-God. That's what it's being stated there.
Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand.
So once again, Jesus, see, he's repeating what he has just stated in these words now. Therefore I speak to them in parables. What it means, that I even come and have spoken to them in the most simplest way possible. To try and communicate to them in the most simple way possible the good news. And that good news is all about God and his character and Jesus' revelation of that. Therefore I speak to them in parables in the most simple way possible, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. See what ends up happening? That's why I'm stating this. It is so important for us that as God is revealing through Jesus and the work of the Holy Spirit that is being done, when we reject the message that Jesus came on this earth to give, when we start rejecting that message, even as Christians, we are in trouble. Verse 14.
And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and not perceive. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them.
See, pay particular attention to that last words that Jesus had stated, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should what? Heal them. Heal them from what? All their carnal view of God, all their fleshy way of looking at God. The only person that removes that kind of a view of God is the person of Jesus Christ. That's why he alone can heal everyone that is in that condition. Nobody else can. Now pay attention to what Jesus now says in the next two verses.
But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear.
Note verse 16, dear ones. Pay particular attention and note what verse Jesus is saying in verse 16. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and for your ears to hear. What is he saying? He is telling them that you, the apostles, are so blessed for your eyes to see who? The person of Jesus Christ. For your eyes to see and for your ears to hear. Which means to say, I am giving you the unadulterated, the pure truth that has never been given before. And we'll see this in verse 17. Never ever given before. But it's being given now by the person of Jesus Christ. That's why he says, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. The only person. And if we don't understand this, we would think, what kind of a person is Jesus? What is this? Like he's full of ego, and he's talking like this. But no, the reason he's stating this, because he alone has that ultimate truth of God. Nobody else has. and he wants to give it. Now note what he says in verse 17.
For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it.
Have you paid attention to what Jesus stated there now in verse 17? Blessed, for assuredly I say to you, that many who? Prophets and righteous men. Who were these people, dear ones? All the people that were involved in the Old Testament times. The writers of the Old Testament, even some of the writers that never found, some of the prophets whose writings never found itself in the Old Testament, the kings whose writings never found into the Old Testament. Jesus is referring to the totality of all the revelation, that was given before Jesus came. All. That's what he's saying. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, which means to say, before he's making this statement, that only Jesus can give that full and complete revelation. No prophet, no king, nobody could give that full revelation of God. So he is stating this. I'll read it again. For assuredly I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. You cannot in any way mistake what Jesus has stated here. And my prayer, look, for all of us, I pray that this church of ours will become a Christ-centered church, a church that only lifts up the person of Jesus Christ. Why? Because what we have read here so far, from verse 10 to verse 17, speaks nothing else. But Jesus is making that complete and total claim that I am the person that is giving you the full revelation that you are capable of receiving and understanding. I am giving this to you. Now, having understood that, let's look at verse 18 and 19.
Therefore, hear the parable of the sower.
So here now Jesus is going to give a parable. And we must pay particular attention to this. Who is the sower? Jesus. Okay? Therefore, hear the parable of the sower. Go ahead.
When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is he who received the seed by the wayside.
Okay. I want us to pay particular attention again to what Jesus stated. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, it's not that God is not wanting them to understand it. It is because they are rejecting Jesus' message. So they are not understanding it. But then what ends up happening? The wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown. So even what happens? Even what they had, the evil one comes and does what? He even snatches away what even understanding and light they have. And then what ends up happening? When he snatches away what they had, he's filling in them what? His teachings, his way of understanding the scriptures, his distorted way of looking at Jesus Christ. So what ends up happening? You're not looking at the true Jesus, but you're looking at a counterfeit Jesus. That's what is happening here. Now I want us to move to verse 24. Making sure that we have understood Jesus clearly saying that the wicked one has come and snatches us away. Verse 24.
Another parable he put forth to them saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way.
So here in these two verses, The kingdom of heaven is when people are following Jesus and obeying God's command and directives. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. What is his field? The field here is the church. Okay? This is applying right now to the church. We will see this. So, a man who sowed good seed in his field. Verse 25. So here, the whole field is sown with good seed. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. So here we got a field of wheat. The enemy comes, and not just in certain, he spreads his tares throughout the whole field where the wheats are. The whole field. He has planted his tares. Now we have to understand when Jesus is speaking what the tares are involved. The tares, when they are growing, you can't tell the difference. But the tares goes underground and its roots even starts affecting the roots of the wheat. It is so vile that it affects even the roots of the wheat. So here, the tares is among the wheat. And we have to see what is going to be the difference. Go ahead.
But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared.
Pay particular attention again to verse 26. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares has appeared. So when do the tares appear? When the crop is what? Bearing fruit. So when the crop is bearing fruit, then the tares appear. And the difference is the wheat will always be above the tares when you will look. Okay? Go ahead.
To the servants of the owner, so the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?
Very good question. Okay? And Jesus is praising it. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? Now, please, this is so important what we're going to look at now. So important, because this goes right at the heart of the Bible, goes right at the heart of the scriptures, goes right to the heart of how sin originated and how God has dealt with the sin situation. Okay? Go ahead. Verse 28.
He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time...
Okay, here. So what Jesus, please, look at what Jesus is stating, okay? They asked and he said, An enemy has done this. Nobody else but an enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us to go and gather them up? And what does Jesus say? But he said to them, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. Dear ones, pay particular attention to those words of Jesus. Let them both grow together until the harvest, which means to say that everything that is in the Bible that is showing us how God operated, how the devil operates, is there running all the way through. And here we are living at the time of the harvest. We are living at this time of the harvest. Let them both grow together until the harvest. For us to understand the depth of what is being stated, let's look at Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. And we'll start with verse 16 to verse 19.
To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children.
Okay. How is the verse reading? God is telling Eve because of what he has done, right? Look at what he's saying. To the woman he said, I. Who? I, God, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. We'll just cover that much and then move on further. What is being stated here, dear ones? The way it reads, who's doing this now? God. But what we looked at, what Jesus said, what did Jesus tell us? An enemy has done this. See how we have to understand Scripture in the light of Jesus' revelation? God did not do this. An enemy has done this. And the only way we are going to understand what the enemy does and what God does is you let them both grow together, and towards the end, as we are going to approach the second coming, towards the harvest, this understanding and this revelation will exponentially explode on planet Earth. And Christians are to give this truth, that this is the God of the universe, and how the wicked one wants to make us look at the God of the universe with a distorted view. Go ahead. Your desire?
Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you.
Here. Read that. See what it is saying? God is saying now what? I am going, like if you don't understand it properly, well, God is stating there, I am going to, in a way, force you to have this kind of a negative desire for your husband. And he shall, who? The husband shall do what? Rule over you. Not with agape love. There's no agape love there. He is going to be in control and, like a dictator, control you.
Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life.
So here, if we don't understand it, what are we seeing? God is the one that's doing this. So it's saying, cursed is the ground for your sake, in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. What did Jesus explain to us in the parable? Who does this? The enemy does this. See the difference? We can understand the scriptures in a way that the enemy wants us to understand it, and we can understand the scriptures the way Jesus is revealing in Matthew chapter 13. And we haven't covered the whole chapter. We just picked out certain portions that had application to us. Go ahead.
Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field.
So, the way we have read, what does it read to us like? God is the one that what? Both thorns and thistles you shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat of the herb of that field. That God is the one that is going to bring the thorns and the thistles and make them suffer and make them pay. When Jesus clearly revealed, let them both grow together. And that an enemy has done this. Verse 9.
In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and dust you shall return.
Please, dear ones, in the light of what we have discussed now we're going to a very, very important point. Jesus is very clear that he sowed the good seed. The enemy has come and sowed the tares, and that this is the work of the enemy. So when Jesus is telling to Adam, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. So which means to say that you are going to go through all kinds of challenges, difficulties, hardship. But is that God putting it on him, or is it the enemy? Important, dear ones. Make sure that we have understood it. Even though you can read and think that God is the one that's doing it, and that's why I keep saying, for us to understand the Holy Bible, Jesus must be the interpreter of the scriptures for us. So he tells us, in the sweat of your face you shall eat till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. So when Jesus is stating there, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, what is he talking of? Death. Isn't he talking of death?
Yes.
That of the ground you were taken, and what? You're going to return back to the ground, which means to say he's talking of death. Who is responsible for death?
Yeah.
The devil,
Yeah.
the enemy. And what we think? That God is the what? The killer. Without Jesus, you will never be able to understand this properly. That's what Jesus is trying to teach, and he's showing us. There to Adam, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. It's talking of death. How we know? For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So automatically, everybody assumes this, uses the scriptures to try and show that God is the one that kills people that are of a certain character or certain trait. Where here we are clearly told that this is not the work of God. This is the work of an enemy. How we know? To make sure that and we've done this before, we're going to do it again, to make sure that there's no mistake. The New Testament always helps us to understand who is behind death, who is behind the killing, who is behind genocide, who is behind some of the things we read in the Old Testament. For that, let's turn to Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15.
Inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage.
How much clearer can we get? There, and I believe Paul is the writer, is telling us clearly the person who is behind death is who? The devil. He has the power of death. He is the enemy that has sown the tares. He is the enemy that is responsible for this. Once we understand Jesus' teachings, we will see this to be a fact. To make sure that we understand this, an enemy has done this. Turn to 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 26. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 26.
The last enemy that will be destroyed is death.
So who's the enemy? The devil. The last enemy. Enemy of humanity, enemy of God, that has planted the tares on this earth among Christians. The enemy, the last enemy to be destroyed is death, the person who is responsible for the death principle. God is only the source of life. God is only gives us life. The devil is antithetical to that. And I'm going back in closing to make sure, especially Sabbath keepers, have understood this very clearly. Very clearly. When in creation week, when God created that seventh day, and he gave it to Adam and Eve. That was to humanity, because the whole human race was in Adam and Eve, in that garden. That is the Hebrew people, Hebrew mind can understand, Jewish mind can understand it. They call that the doctrine of solidarity, or your federal head. So all of us were in Adam and Eve. Okay? So when God gave that Sabbath, It was to be a memorial to what? Clearly, we are told that He is the Creator. And Sabbath keepers should be foremost in understanding this. That the Sabbath is given, it's the seal of God. That it is given for us never to forget. Doesn't matter what happens, you teach it to your servants, you teach it to your household, you make sure that this is communicated. That the God of the universe is the Creator. The enemy that has sown the tares, he is the killer. He is the destroyer. And that's why Jesus Christ is so important for all of us. Without Jesus, dear ones, we will never have understood this. And I have condensed this in the least way that I could possibly condense this. And I thank God that I managed to cover it within the time frame that we are supposed to be covering the message. And I thank God for this. And I hope and pray that all of us will never lose sight of the paramountcy, the supreme importance of the person of Jesus Christ. The whole world needs the person of Jesus Christ. They don't need anybody else. They need the person of Jesus Christ, especially at this final phase when the harvest is going to happen.